So, we get more shops of here in St. Parliament. I've been here guys for 7 years, 7 or 8 years now. Labour Club. So guys, my presentation is going to be a massive crossover on what Tommy has just spoken about and what I'm going to speak about benefits of athletic development. So, a slightly different format. I'm going to invite a couple of questions, a few questions throughout, and try and answer them as best I can. So my background, guys, played most of football. I see guys here from concrete. Played most of football in there. Played also in Dublin here, Ireland, and in Meath as well, small bit in Meath. Living in County Meath, from County Clare, over in County Dublin, so there's a mix. So guys, so the aim of today, guys, or this presentation I'm going to give guys is an overview of what athletic development is. Okay. So that to present you guys how it benefits and how it's beneficial to GAA players. Basically, you should be doing it, should be implementing it in your programs, with whether it's under 8 right through the senior footballers. There's a place for it. So the outcomes out of the right through the end of no, sorry, at the end of the slide. So you can develop a better understanding of what athletic development is. And hopefully that you'll integrate some of what I'm saying and what Tommy was saying, guys, into your programs. Because no matter what you're doing in your training session, there should be a 10-15 minute period given over within the session to some kind of athletic development, or be it called injury prevention, whatever it is that needs to be happening. So there's a quote from a training division coach from American the process of evaluating training all components of athleticism according to the demands of the sport and the qualities of the individual player. Okay, so what does that say to you? Any questions on that? Does anything jump out there? Okay, we'll move on. So evaluating, guys, the first thing is to evaluate. So Tommy did it for a lot of the teams here, a lot of players here, a functional movement screen. So a functional movement screen, guys, was developed by a guy called Gray Cook, an American. It's a set of 7 screens that will show various compensations, tightnesses, weaknesses within your body. And it's a great place, it's probably the place to start, it is the place to start for you if you're developing an athletic development program within your team. Okay? Takes a bit of time, but it's certainly worth doing. The overhead squat, the hurdle step, inline lunge, shoulder mobility, etc., etc. There's 7 of them, guys. And in the screen, you're scored 0 to 3. So the max you can get is 21. To pass, 14. If you're getting less than 14 on a functional movement screen, you need to be attending to someone like Tommy, or you need to be going to a doctor, or you need to be getting yourself looked at, because you're definitely not in the shape or ready to play sport. It's a huge indicator of injury. So poor scores in that, guys, are a big predictor of injury. That's going to happen in the short term, not necessarily in the long term, in the next 6 months. If you as a coach within your club, didn't want to go down the road or hadn't got the resources, or there is a few bob there is a bit of a charge on a functional movement screen. If there's one screen you were to do, it would be the overhead squat. The overhead squat shows up a lot of tightnesses, weaknesses, and deficiencies of movement. And it's a really good place to start. Not overly difficult. There are courses out there that will give you a basis of how to perform an overhead squat test, and how to read it, probably more importantly, and then more importantly again, how to prescribe corrective exercises. Any questions on that, guys, on the functional movement screen?
Do you have to be expert at reading? Is there any value in somebody, like myself, whatever, doing this?
There absolutely is, because for GAA players and for field sports players in general, there are common faults, or common injury sources. For example, you will see in a lot of functional movement screens, the heels will come off the ground as you're squatting down, which shows tightness or lack of mobility around the ankle, or tightness in the calves, or perhaps tightness in the glutes. So there's a lot of commonalities there. Many of them, the hand will fall forward, which will, you know, a lot of mobility around the thoracic area. The big one for most kids, certainly young kids, are on the growth spurt and talking about that there. They just can't get down, so their squat goes to there. You know, ideally, a full range of movement on a functional movement screen, your bum should be getting below your knees. If you're not getting 90 degrees minimum, you know, there's a lack of mobility there. So number 2, guys, the fitness test. So you do your functional movement screen, finishing with the fitness testing. And fitness testing sets off alarm bells with players all over the place because it makes sweat, blood and tears. And there's still a fair element of that out there, guys. But a lot of fitness testing, if I was to say to you, the number 1 fitness test in the Premiership, even now, right now today, for United, Chelsea, etc., is the bleep test. The bleep test is outdated, lacks relevance to the GA, to field sports, because it's a constant moving test. Also, you're going in one direction and one direction and one direction and one direction, which has no relevance to field sports. For the top guys, it carries on 12-14 minutes. You know, 12-14 seconds is probably too long in field sports. So your tests need to be relevant to what you're actually trying to do. You know, test players for field sports, and there needs to be a major correlation with what's going on in the pitch. So there needs to be change in direction, there needs to be short duration. For example, the T-agility test, 20-metre sprint test, a power test like a medicine ball throw or pass. All of which, guys, you don't need massive resources to test. Like, to get down the road, the doubles here, football, etc., you've got jump mats and speed gates, etc. That equipment can be expensive. But for you, with your team, you can perform a number of these tests with very limited or little or no equipment. Questions, guys?
Gordon, how do you go about setting them up? So if you're running an under 16 or an under 15 team or a minor team, how many people would you need and what equipment would you tend to need to set them up in an average GA hall? Okay.
For rudimentary tests, guys, say the first one would be the overhead squat. I was not talking about that, but sure, here. There's a formation, or there's how you should do the tests, and functional movement screen would be number 1. Then you're looking at power. So a power test, guys, would be, say, with a 4K medicine ball, how far you can push it out there ahead. Okay? And it's easy, you can put down a tape measure on the ground, etc. Just measure that. Strength test, or strength endurance test, like a push-up test for 30 seconds. How many push-ups can you get in 30 seconds? And then an anaerobic test, 150-metre test, or you can go down the road, just a speed test, like a 20-metre test. Now the speed gates will get it bang on, breaks the line, and then breaks around the far end with the speed gates. The speed gates are expensive, they're about €1,000 around. But you can do it with your stopwatch. You know, not absolutely clinically perfect, but for you, you know, if you want to do this with your team, you know, it's absolutely acceptable. So guys, they're the kind of tests I'm talking about. The bleep test, I leave it out. I genuinely would. I think there's no place for it. Any questions?
What about endurance testing?
You see, speed endurance, 150 test will do that. Where you're changing direction, there's a run-off, 30 seconds run-off. That it's an intermittent test. What you're looking to try and do is recreate. So it's intermittent start-stop. There's a start-stop, but the bleep is continuous. It's continuous. So the relevance isn't there. Okay, guys. The third one then is skills testing. And I know that the Dublin team did a lot of this last season. Skills testing, guys, it's important. It gives you an idea of where your team is at. If your players are only comfortable off one side, be it hurling or football, you're really only half a hurler, half a footballer. To be able to perform off both sides, unopposed, opposed, and then in game situations in training, in game situations, in competition. That, I suppose, that gives you the real picture of where players are at. Because they can be easily set up, skills tests can be easily set up, So it's a 30-metre kick, it's a 30-metre pass, it's shooting off right, it's shooting off left, it's shooting in a standing position, it's shooting while moving. But you know, it gives you the full picture of the player. So you've got the functional movement screen, fitness testing, and then the game sense for the skills testing. Okay, guys, so the results. What you're left with then is what's called a performance pyramid. And for most, I'm going to scribble this up here, for most GAA players, the performance pyramid will look something like this. Okay. With skill here on top, okay. Function here, and the foundation test. Okay. Foundation is what basically is what the function movement screen shows up. If your foundation is poor, guys, it's not going to support the function, you know, the actual playing, okay, and how you are on the pitch, your speed, your strength, etc. This is the number one. Your foundation needs to be right. And what Tommy was saying there about the landing techniques and the exercises, the corrective exercises, etc., they need to happen before you can get into function, before you can get into skill. So for a player like this, mobility and stability work would be absolutely key. And a lot of field sports players you find would have poor mobility and poor function. And simply because a lot of what Tommy was saying, they're down to coach education and player education. Just didn't know, I just don't know. Any questions on that? You can often have, say, something like this, whereby the skill is very strong, the function not so strong, and then the foundation even less, guys. I can think of a lot of players like that where they're very skillful, perhaps not so fit, and the function would be not so poor again, the big full forward or the goalkeeper, sorry, something.
When you say function, sorry, the bottom of the foundation,
Yeah.
is that core fitness?
Yeah. It's core work, it's strength work, etc. It's the foundations that you need in order to get fitter, in order to improve your skill levels. Because basically what I'm saying here is that it should look something like this. Okay? One needs to support the other. Okay? So the foundation needs to be there before the function, before the skills can progress. Questions on any of that?
Gordon, is there anything to like pre-season training or anything, do you stage through the year? Like is that to be set to like stamina or running or I know obviously the foundation was important thing, but is there a fair timeline through the year of how you load things? Or?
Yeah. The modern thinking or best practice right now would say that HIIT training, high intensity interval training, is the most effective way of getting fit or performing or preparing for performance, whereby players are going in a burst for say 20, 30, 40 seconds and then maybe 20 seconds off, and they're going again, 20 seconds off. So in that period of time, in that 40 seconds where they're working, or 30 seconds where they're working, or when they're starting out, 20 seconds where they're working absolutely flat out, and then getting their break and going again, and then getting their break and going again. So it's intermittent, it's as with the pitch, but the continuous stuff of warm-up of 10 laps or 800 metre runs, ultimately what happens is it does affect performance in that players become fatigued, it breaks down power, breaks down speed. And what you're trying to do is build powerful players, strong players, fast players. Endurance stuff or stuff with that's over 3, 4, 5 minutes, that doesn't do that. Just doesn't do it. So it's ineffective. There are better ways of spending your time. If you're going to be there for an hour, high intensity interval training is the most effective way of doing that.
Sorry, Gordon, just I think you have to be mindful of the fact that we're talking about juveniles and adults.
Yeah,
because the two pyramids there are the inverse of each other.
Yeah,
But if you have a player whose pyramid is the top one,
yeah.
there's only so much you can do in the 2 hours. I think getting buy-in with parents is huge there. I think someone's, you need to get the parent to realise that's the pyramid that child has, not that one. And how do I get the parent to go for the one, in 2 hours when I'm not even really talking to the parent?
Yeah, absolutely, I agree with that. Guys, in terms of longevity, I suppose that's partly where I'm coming from as well. In terms of longevity and keeping players in the game, keeping players playing the game, and in particular where there's the sticky point around 14, 15, 16, where some kids can be kind of knife edge, or going to stay with the game or not stay with the game. If that's their pyramid there, and their function is poor, they're going to start picking up lots of injuries, and they're going to get disheartened, and they're going to get peed off in the whole situation. So I suppose if you can get buy-in from the parents that, look, if the kid improves his foundation, he's not going to have as many injuries. Tommy isn't going to be seeing them as much, and he's going to stay with the game. As Tommy was saying, it's about enjoying the game, it's about enjoying sport, whatever the level is at. And if the foundation is wrong, you're just not going to get that level of enjoyment from it. But yeah, definitely buy-in from parents for underage players is critical. Yeah. So, sorry.
With those pyramids there, they're a little bit fed up. From a team point of view, wouldn't necessarily want to start with great foundation, great function. And you can't keep the ball, you can't hit the ball. So trade that off, that's something else.
Definitely. And guys, that's where the scores will show. When you test a player, if he's got great function and great foundation, but he's poor off his left side or just can't catch the ball over his head, that's where that player needs to work. Yeah. Okay, so the three main areas of leg development, guys. Strength, flexibility, and speed, guys. They're inextricably linked. You can't really have one without the other. Of them all, strength is the cornerstone, guys. It's absolutely central. Without strength, it's very difficult to improve or develop the other areas in terms of leg development, because it just underpins everything else that's done. You're trying to create powerful players, you can't have power without strength. You're trying to create speedy players, fast players, you can't have that without strength. Flexibility, in terms of flexibility, unless you can work through a full range of movement, full range of motion, guys, in the movements of the pitch, it doesn't really matter. If you're strong but you're not flexible, if you're flexible but you're not strong, one of those can't be handled with the other. So guys, it affects everything. Strength affects everything. Posture, and it's a big thing in particular underage players and adult players that drive a lot, sitting in the crouched position. Hip flexors, pressure on the lower back. As Tommy was saying, when you get up out of that position, you don't naturally go back into perfect again. That's just not how the body works. And then some coaches would exasperate that by putting players doing sit-ups. You're doing sit-ups, guys. You're putting pressure on your hip flexors, on your lower back. So you're just exasperating what's going on for maybe 6 hours in school that day. You're just making the whole situation worse. Better that you're going into some kind of lunging situation where you're stretching out that whole area. So it's important what you do in your warm-up and you do in your session doesn't build on top of the poor practices going on, say, for driving 3 hours that day or 6 hours sitting in school. Any questions about around any of that? Or comments? So, needs to be functional, guys. That's the big one. Okay, needs to. There's this is today's Irish Times Cork physio saying that they're no longer doing squats because it's leading to hip injuries in Cork squat. Now, he also cites a weight here of 150 kilos in some of our squat. The squat is an absolutely brilliant exercise and should be in every program for any GA player, any field sport player. But if you develop a 150 kilo squat over 3 months, yes, you're definitely going to be in trouble. There needs to be a foundation there that takes a long time to put down. takes years to put down. And I would have a theory that a lot of what's going on is fast tracking. Players are going from 0 to 60 in 6 months. And the base not being there, eventually it is going to break down. It is all going to break down. So, and I see that with teams. I know of a senior football team on Tuesday night went in with 0 training age. When I say training age, supervised training in a gym environment, and went straight into 1 rep max testing. That's asking for trouble. Asking for trouble. Any questions on that? See, 1 rep max testing for me is dangerous. You know, if there is a place for it, you get as much out of 3 rep max testing. You know, it's safer, and in terms of information, it gives you the information you need. Sorry.
For probably senior inter-county teams, there are a lot of our players coming through development squads.
Yeah.
Would that be the main reason for that? Where kids are put in development squads and they're taught their foundation and then they're brought into the senior. Anybody who didn't come through the development squad wouldn't really consider it.
That's a very good point. That is true. But a lot of what's going on in development squads, they're not looking at in development squads. I would have the opinion that children shouldn't be lifting weight up until 16. Anything that goes before that is what's called anatomical adaptations for using body weight, maybe some bands, maybe some medicine balls. So for anyone who wants to do a gym environment at 16 plus, they need 2 years of that. They need 2 years of that minimum before they can move on. And if they haven't had that, the foundation isn't there. It just isn't there. And even at that, when they do get into the gym, a lot of what they're doing is with high reps, say reps of 10 to 20, with lightweight. Initially, that's what young players and inexperienced or players of low training age should be doing. On this one here, guys. So these are movements. So in terms of movements, guys, with strength training, it's movement that you train. So it's the squat, it's the lunge. It's not I'm training my arms today, I'm training my legs. You know, for the best way to train field sports players is overall body programming. Okay, so it's not shoulders, chest today, and legs tomorrow. It's overall. So you're doing an upper body exercise, lower body exercise, upper body exercise, lower body exercise within your program of the day, because that's your body doesn't work in isolation on the pitch and shouldn't do when you're training either. Okay, so maybe you have a day where you're concentrating on the squat. And maybe the next day you're concentrating maybe on the deadlift. And the next day maybe you're concentrating on the pull-up. That's the core of it, that's the main exercise within your program. But it's not concentrating on your biceps. And core, number one thing guys, you need to train stability in your core and also dynamic stability in your core. So that when you're moving, you can remain stable. And when you're not moving, firstly, you got to get that right. You got to in the banks, in the side banks, in bridging, single leg work. But going into a gym without having a stable core or a strong core, you know, the benefits won't accrue as quickly or as strongly as the player. Build from the bottom up. Tommy was saying there, guys, that most injuries within field sports are to the lower body, so that's where you build first. So you're building from the bottom up. Again, players will go in, and you see this in gyms all the time, the first thing they'll do is to start benching. So you build from the bottom up, through squats, through lunges, through deadlifts. But your legs are where it's more susceptible to injury, and that's what you should look at building first. In any program of a day, so you're doing a pulling exercise, you're doing a pushing exercise to counteract that, you're doing a single leg exercise, you're doing a double leg exercise. So if you've got that in your program of any day, you're not going to go too far wrong. Adaptation, guys. So as you get better, but it takes a bit of time. As you get better, you need to build more. So you do put on a bit of weight. But they say, guys, the kind of the ballpark figure is 10%. As you're adapting 10% onto what you're lifting. And there needs to be variation. So you're staying on a program for 4 to 6 weeks and you're changing. You're staying in a program 4 to 6 weeks, you're changing. It's not like you start the program in January and you change it in June. Every 4 to 6 weeks, the body adapts and gets used to it, and your benefits accruing, you know, they eventually plateau off. Questions, guys? So flexibility, guys, range of movement around the joint. It's developed, as with any other part of leg development, over time. It takes time. It takes time. And it's very much the unsexy part of athletic development. People don't like stretching. Whether you're a child or whether you're an adult player, just don't like stretching. Also, it takes time. The mobility or the dynamic one we do at the start will do some good in what, or it'll set you up for the activity that's afterwards. But in terms of developing your long-term flexibility, not really. So if you've got an hour session or an hour and a quarter session, to do a cool down at the end, give 10 minutes of that, it's worthwhile, but it'll only fix what's going on in that session. For you to really develop your flexibility, that's on your own time, at home, 15, 20 minutes per day. It does take time. So the benefits of it, guys, reducing injury rate, that's better movement, more efficient movement, move better on the pitch. The big one, as Tommy was saying there, more mobility around the hip flexor, leads to a longer stride. So eventually that'll lead to being faster. Decreasing dominance, delayed onset muscle soreness, dominance. Studies will have shown that a proper cool down, like static stretching, like contrast showers, hot shower, cold shower, will definitely aid dominance. So you're not as sore the next day after a match, after a session. But to do nothing is nothing. You've got to do something after a session.
Where would foam rolling fit in?
Foam rolling, guys, is based on a principle called self-myofascial massage. So it's basically you're giving yourself a massage with a foam roll. And it's what happens with your muscles is you develop knots, which are areas which will cause you pain, and the foam roller will ease those out of your muscles. And you know, 10 or 15 minutes on that. If you get to the session at 7 o'clock, you get there 20 to 7, 10 or 15 minutes on that, and enter a dynamic bone would be absolutely perfect. That would be the ideal. And I know a lot of the intermittent players, that's what they do. They'll get there 20 minutes before and get that done. It's the next day after a match, and you're feeling sore and you've done your cool down, wherever you're feeling sore the next day, brilliant for that as well. But the foam roller is here to stay. It's not a fad, it is here to stay. It does work. So the broad sport, guys, in particular for teenage players, juvenile players, girls starts at 11, and goes through for maybe 2 to 3 years after that. Boys, 12, starts a little bit later and goes through 2 to 3 years after that. During the growth spurt, guys, massive changes take place in the teenager's body. Tendons and muscles tighten because they don't develop at the same rate as the bones are developing, and can lead to injuries within players if they're not managed. I'm too sore to train tonight, possible Schlatter's disease, etc. These all happen around the time of the growth spurt. So guys, that needs to be managed. You need to be, as a coach, you need to be aware of that. Also, and the big thing as well, a player who was a brilliant player at 12 and comes to 13 and suddenly their skill levels have gone backwards. That can happen, guys, as well through the growth spurt. And you just got to be patient and bear with that. They're going to come out the far side of it. It's not that they'll become a bad player overnight. It's just that their bodies are adapting to the changes they're going through and their skill levels regress. Go ahead. So it requires reactive agility, acceleration, deceleration, change of direction, constant changing environment, and performance skills again. That's the challenge for a player. Okay? So you're looking to get developed speed. And then keep on doing it faster. But the big one, guys, is, and this is very possibly what you were saying there about developing endurance, it's repeated sprintability. So that a player can perform possibly up to 100 sprints in a game, on average about 100 sprints in a game. So he's going as fast in minute 72 as he is in minute 2. That's what you're looking to develop. And that takes practice, and that takes time, and that takes a lot of strength development and power development. 65% of sprints in a match are 0 to 10 meters. That's power. That's not speed, max speed. That's acceleration power. So that's what you're looking to develop. 65%, guys. So the vast majority, 10% of sprints are over 30 meters. But in training, you sometimes see teams that are sprinting halfway back, halfway back. So what you're looking to develop is the first 10 meters. Speed's a skill, guys, so it must be practiced. That's what all skills do. You know, the Usain Bolts in this world, a lot of that's genetics, but speed can be taught through mechanics and through practice within sessions. Okay, keep going. You've seen a lot of this. Three main areas of injury, guys: landing, sprinting, turning. Again, go ahead. Just one there, guys. If you get an injury and don't rehab it properly, just 29% of injuries recur again within 2 months of going back playing. That's true. Insufficient rehab, poor rehab, or sometimes no rehab. The rest of it will be grand. No, it won't be grand. If you don't do anything about it, guys, generally, 1 in 3 will come back and visit within 2 months with the same injury. Third quarter of the game, guys, that's the danger quarter. There's a major study going on at the moment on re-warm-ups. And there's a serious case made for doing a warm-up, a re-warm-up again at half-time. 36% of all injuries after half-time, in the 10 minutes after half-time in GAA. So guys, the thing of going into the dressing room, sitting down 5-10 minutes, and back straight out again, that's the danger period. So I would seriously consider that, some kind of warm-up, re-warm-up at half-time, rather than do nothing. 60% of it is the second half. Some of that is down to conditioning, a lot of it is down to conditioning, poor conditioning. GAA contact sport, vast majority of injuries in GAA occur in the non-contact area. Sprinting, turning, landing. Landing, sprinting and turning, guys, you can put all, that's within your power to put right in your sessions. That needs to be practiced. So guys, the key, the take-home message, guys, the athletic development is key. It's within your power to put it into a session. Don't think about it, it takes time, it does take time, there needs to be a foundation there. The foundation must be worked on, and must be worked on constantly, guys, okay? So just because you develop a good foundation, it doesn't mean it's going to be exactly the same the following year. It needs to be worked on an ongoing basis. It reduces injury, Tommy said that as well, and it does improve performance. Because it gives you the groundwork to build function and to build skill. Okay guys, thanks. If there's any questions, I'll try and answer some of them.
As someone said, a lot of juvenile teams, so you said the three, the FMS test, the fitness test, and then the skills test. And in practical terms, how would you, it takes time to do each of those, so you need to do it over a period of a few months. And then you get feedback to each player. How would you actually work that?
It's a sticky one. If a player, has performed particularly poorly, you give them a couple of areas they need to work on. You work on this and come back again 2 months later and see how it's gone. Don't leave it too long, and come back in maybe 2 months later. It's work given over a session to skills testing. You get it done in a session, you get it done in an hour, you get a team done in an hour. But, or even, you know, occasionally at the end of a session, just for a fun thing at the end, have a skills test, you know, maybe around the 20-metre line, how many balls you can kick over in 30 seconds, with a bunch of balls there, this kind of stuff. And so there can be a fun element to it as well. Or you just pick out 1 or 2 or 3 players in a session right at the end and just test them. But it's something that can be built into a session in a fun way. It doesn't have to be anything serious, and it doesn't have to be developed into a slagging match in front of their peers, you know. There's various ways to do it, but it's definitely worth doing. And it shows you as well how the players are progressing, gives you a yardstick as well.
Like, problem is, you know, with especially teenagers, they know it all. So when you ask them to go and do exercises, you don't have any advice on how to hammer home. I see the lads are here watching on, so hopefully they're going to be listening.
A big one I use, the average injury nowadays costs €500. Doctor, physio, medication, etc. Petrol. And €500. But their parents are going to have to pay for it, not the club. Parents are going to have to pay for it. So parents get that message, it filters down. Just filter down. Tommy Coleman's done, but that's the truth about it. So, you know, that's a major one for me. If we put down your physio bill, I worked with a club a couple of years back, I won't say where, a couple of years back. The physio bill the year before I came in was €26,000, the year before I came in. The following year, 6,000. Down to stuff like this, doing stuff like this in warm-ups, doing stuff like this at home, hammering that message home. So it does cut down the physio prices, physio bills, which is a major part of it, a major headache for every club.
The disease you mentioned a few minutes ago, is that a burning of the feet?
Which was it?
I can't remember, you mentioned the disease a few minutes ago.
Dorsal slackers.
Yeah, is that with your feet?
No, it's a little knob or a little bump here below your knee. It develops on your shin bone or just below your knee. It causes major pain and will put kids out of sport. It's an overuse injury, and if not dealt with, can finish kids for a couple of years in sport. The big thing is rest, unfortunately. But it has been shown that strengthening the bones through squatting and lunging, etc., exercise like that will help offset it.
I'm actually doing a thesis on a pre-philosophy,
Yeah.
but I think the lack of awareness within the headache towards that is major, and I think it has a big impact on the future of players if they want. I like that also happens to myself, and just playing and causing so much training and stuff in the knees. I just think there's a serious lack of awareness when it comes to that between boys and girls.
It's a big point. It's a big bugbear of mine that in the middle of this cross sport, or coming towards the end of this cross sport, failure is thrown in, and it's a big pressure on children. When you know they're going through all these changes in their lives, and if that's not managed in terms of regression and the need to stretch through and strengthen through that period, it can cause some problems and turn a lot of kids away from the sport.
Very last question. Last.
Well, can you comment on the idea of body recuperation in the off-season?
In the off-season? Yeah. There's a lot of that, a lot of the athletic development and a lot of the prehab and rehab should occur in the off-season. Like, the idea nowadays, if you want to progress and you want to make some kind of goal of your career as a sports person, of taking 6 weeks off and not doing anything, or 2 months off or 3 months off and not doing anything. There's no, the studies have shown now that the regression that's made, the weight that's put on, etc., there's no place for it. So I'm not saying you got it. 1 or 2 sessions per week during the off season, the foam rolling, the stretching, getting injuries right, going to your physio then and getting the injuries right, that's when that should take place. But ignoring it, resting and doing nothing about it, no. So the off season is a time to recuperate and get injuries right. But do nothing about it, no. It gives you an opportunity to look after those wheels. As Tommy says, you know, you can play through, but when you have the opportunity to do something about it, that's the time to do it. Yeah.
Okay guys, we're slightly over time, so we're going to have to wrap this. An awful lot of stuff to consider there, and a very apt time of the year to be doing it, so I hope you got a lot from it. A big thank you to Gordon.